Welcome everyone. We're just letting everyone start trickling in. Okay, great. Welcome to Monograph's first product updates webinar. I'm George Valdez, part of the Monograph team, and I'm joined by Robert Ewan, co-founder and CEO, who's going to be walking us through a series of awesome new features to help you and your team streamline workflows and to become more efficient and profitable. As a bit of housekeeping, you'll be able to use the Q&A at the bottom to submit any and all questions. We'll be sure to provide some answers in the Q&A box throughout the webinar. And at the end, Robert and I will go over some of these questions towards the end. Anything we can't get to, we'll follow up in an email. As a reminder also, this webinar is being recorded. So if you have to duck out or team members of yours weren't able to participate, this will be made available to everybody. And with that, I'd like to introduce Robert.
Thank you, George. And welcome everyone to our very first Monograph product webinar. Super excited. And to be very honest, I'm a bit nervous. So if there's any, let's be honest with me later on when we do Q&A, let me know how I did. This is my first attempt at essentially giving a presentation on what we've been up to and what we're gonna do in the following weeks. For anyone attending who is not currently a Monograph user, I want to take a few minutes and start off the webinar by telling you a little bit about myself, who I am, the team behind the scene, and what our mission is. So essentially, as George mentioned, I'm Robert, a co-founder and CEO at Monograph. And simply put, we are a team of trained architects. We're software developers, we are software designers, and collectively we have MArchs from Michigan, MIT, and Columbia. We've worked at large firms like SOM and Softy Architects, and small firms like Kufineri. Needless to say, we've ran into our fair share of nightmares around time tracking and project management. That leads me to what is Monograph. But before we do, it's super important to address why we are working on Monograph. We are motivated to creating a better built environment by enabling professionals to work together seamlessly. Today, more so than ever, to empower architects to work effortlessly between the office and the home. We're starting with purely the fundamentals: time, projects, budgets, and invoices. Monograph, a simple firm management tool. A tool that strives to understand projects are made up of multiple phases, super complex relationships, and that relationship is reflective on time and fee across the board. A tool that allows you to wear multiple hats, thus enabling you to track time at multiple rates. Now, a real-time visibility on staying on budget. And lastly, since we started with time tracking, it just made sense that we ended with invoicing for that time. A simple firm management tool. To accomplish this, we stand on 3 pillars today to lead our vision. Being a design-first company, simplicity is extraordinarily important. We spend a lot of time and focus on how design systems influence the way we solve firm management. Famously quoted by Mies van der Rohe, less is more, and God is in the details. We all know that successful project management tools thrives on great communication. As architects, we communicate visually. Core to Monograph, we drive visibility and transparency from representation. Lastly, architecture is a service-based business. Our job is to ensure that the revenue decisions that you have to make is always backed by accurate and comprehensive data. Awesome. Now here's the agenda for the rest of the webinar. I need to give a lot of credit before we dive in to all of the customers that have essentially participated and continuously to give us feedback as we add updates that I'm about to share and continue to give us feedback on how they operate as a core business. I'll cover Some of the recent updates specifically focus around time with one very special addition at the end. Stay tuned for that part. And then I'll go into a live demo before sharing features that we're actively working on. And then finally end with a Q&A. Stay tuned to the very end because there is going to be a massive game changer that I want to present. Timer. Whether you're charging lump sum, a percent of construction, fixed fee plus hourly, or just straight hourly, a project's profitability is based fundamentally on the total hours worked and accurately tracked by everyone. The following updates are all in response in helping you better track, approve, be consistent, and report on that time. We now have a timer. Track and pause time as throughout the day and switch between projects ad hoc. We've made a number of updates across timesheets. We're streamlining the access that you have to your current work timesheets, making exporting data much more flexible, and empowering project managers to approve timesheet entries. We've been working to essentially make the reminder of doing timesheets more efficient. Let's be honest, entering time is the last thing any of us ever want to do, but it's absolutely essential to the well-being of a project's success. Weekly reminders is here now to help everyone on the team track their time. Payroll report. It's a brand new report so that every project manager can now see very clearly on all the total hours worked and total non-billable hours worked. The last few months, we wanted to make sure that time is better tracked, approved, and making reminders easier, exporting, and reporting. What I want to share next up is really super excited. You can now duplicate projects. So many of you have been asking for this feature and we finally did it. We made a really big push and exclusively here, we haven't made an announcement to anyone else yet. I'm delighted to share, you can now create duplicate projects. Now from here, I'll cover some of the recent updates on Monograph by diving into a live demo. Cross your fingers, I hope nothing goes wrong. There's always something that pops up during a live demo. Here we are, we're in a Monograph demo account. The first thing I want to show everyone is let's just focus on going into the settings and turning a few of these updates on. I'll navigate up here to the settings tab. And the first thing that I want to show is let's turn on and enable the timer. For every Monograph user who has been with Monograph already, you have to turn on timer. And for every new Monograph customer, timer will be automatically enabled already. To do this, you would click on the edit button, toggle the timer on, click save, and you'll notice here, now we know that the timer is enabled. So what's amazing about the timer is on any page in Monograph, all you have to do is start hitting the play button. And now time is automatically being tracked. When you need to, return back to here and click and toggle on the timer to open it up. From this point, you can add time to a project they're actively working on. So let's pick 5200 Perry Drive. I'll apply some time towards design development. I'll select the role of principal and activity of administration. And I'll also leave a note, meeting with a client. By clicking create entry, now the entry is created and we're actively now continuing to track time against that entry. When you're done, all you have to do is click the stop button. And if you click back, you can see all the other time entries for the week. And you can always start and resume time for any one of these projects. So in this case, let's start working on 12 Palm Springs by clicking here. And while that's going, I'll come back to the settings tab and let's turn on timesheets reminder. I'm gonna go over here to timesheets and turn on email reminder. What's great about this tool is you have the flexibility to select the date that you want to turn on email reminders and the time you want to send it. And we also allow you to customize the email message in the body of that email. Let's see what that looks like when you actually send the email. Go over here to my other tab. So this will be an example of what that timesheet reminder looks like, where the body of that message would go right here, and we autofill the name and a link to go right directly to that week's timesheets. Let's go back to the app. The next thing I want to show everyone is to turn on timesheet approvals. To do that, the first thing we have to make sure is that the policies for the people that you want to give access to in terms of timesheets approval needs to have timesheet edit turned on. So let's say I want project managers to be able to approve time. I'm going to scroll down here and to ensure that the project manager policy, by clicking edit and allowing timesheet edit to be turned on. This will give every person who has the project manager policy level the ability to approve time. Let's close out here. Those are the three things that we're doing in settings and to enable timesheet reminders, timer, and then turning on timesheet approval. And all that in retrospect is talking about time. What we made a really more efficient is by clicking timesheets now, you go directly to this week's time. So you can see here the timesheet that's available for this week and my timesheet entries for 3 different projects. Organizational timesheets has not changed. It's still going to be up here by clicking organizational timesheets. This gives you access to everyone else's timesheets for the week. What's great now is we have a new download button. It's a little down arrow right up here in the upper right-hand corner. And we're allowing you now to essentially format the way you want data out, either dates as columns or dates as rows, and the ability to include notes. There, the next thing I want to show everyone is essentially our new payroll reports. You'll find that in the reports tab. Payroll button here. And you can see the total amount of hours worked by the whole team. Hours worked hours is essentially all time billed against projects. And then the other columns are all overhead categories with the sum total all the way at the bottom. Now, we're getting really close to one of my favorite things. We're going to go into a project, navigate here, go to 12 Palm Springs, and then we'll click on timesheets. This timesheet here underneath the project name is how you get to timesheets approval. What's great here is for everyone, every employee, every staff member and team member that's working on 12 Palm Springs, you'll be able to see their time entries from the previous week here. You'll be able to know very clearly of who's working on the project, in what capacity, how they're categorizing time, and how much total time. And if any of this is incorrect, all you have to do is click reject. A new hatch pattern will override the entire timesheet entry, and Fernando will also see that as well. How you would communicate that to Fernando is by clicking on the little mail symbol here, and that will automatically open your default email client where you can communicate to Fernando why this time was wrong. Close that out. Now that we're in projects, the finale of the recent update is the ability to duplicate projects. So what I'll do is I'll go back to the overview. There's 3 little buttons here in the right-hand side. Clicking here will allow us to duplicate this project, 12 Palm Springs. And by doing so, we go directly into the project setup pages. Keep in mind, the first thing that I recommend to do is changing the name. We default by adding the word copy in front, but let's call this project Robert. Hit save. And you can see here we are all automatically pre-filling previous information. So please remember to adjust your correct billing fees and to adjust your correct billing percentages on the phases for this new project. What's super cool is the next coming up, the things that we are working on is trying to make life a little bit better and more streamlined in regards to budgeting and projects. Currently, for every project, there's 5 total tabs that you need to fill out to create a project, from general, billing, phases, roles, and team. In the next couple slides, I'll show you how we're going to condense these 4 tabs, billing, phases, roles, and team, into just one single page. With that in mind, I'm going to switch back to the slides and we'll present you on some of the core features that we're currently working on, covering the spectrum of really recent updates and talking in constantly with our current customers. I want to reflect and let everyone know that these are things that we're actively working on, and we'll love to get your feedback at the end of the webinar and what you feel, if we've missed any large gaps in terms of covering the feature sets that we need to make this really worthwhile. Project status. Currently, we only have 2 project status of either active or inactive. We're about to introduce 5 new ones: proposed projects, active, pause, cancel, and completed, giving you more control in how you categorize the work, but more importantly, how do you manage pause projects? Our smart pause features allow us to better capture the total duration of a pause and adjust accordingly when a project resumes. When a project or a phase are paused, we can automatically and automate all of our scheduling and forecasting features to respond accordingly to that change. Changing the way projects are budgeted and planned. As stated earlier, we're combining those 4 pages into one. We've learned so much from our conversations with our customers, and we'll love to present what we've designed. Staying true to our background, we do draw and design as much as we can before we start writing code. Let me switch on over and present some of those slides in terms of what the future of project budgeting will look like. Keep in mind, this is not the real app, and these are essentially mock-ups. And at the end of the webinar, please find time to shoot us a little response on what you think this new version of budgeting feels for you. Right from the get-go, you'll be able to essentially determine a phase, just as usual, the date duration for each phase, the fee type, and then go right into adding a role. And as you know already, in Monograph, your billable rate is not assigned to a person, but assigned to a role, and you can customize that billable rate per role independently for each phase. Assign a person, and then being very specifically assign the total number of hours for that person. Continue to add more phases, add more roles, add more team members, and their specific hours to that project. And as you're planning and you're trying to figure out what's the right allocation of time for each person on each phase, we're automatically doing all the calculations in the background to give you the total budget. So we're rolling all this information right up to the top, and then also allowing you to edit any number of these numbers. So for example, right now we get $51,000 for the total budget. If this is not correct and we need to readjust this to 50, you can do so. And then what's amazing is you can then lock it. When you do lock the total budget, we're doing all the math in the background, but we're shuffling that math within these 2 phases and not adding any more to the total budget. So I'm gonna go ahead and readjust time for the project designer and schematic design, and then I'm gonna lock design development at $38,000. Keep in mind, this is now locked, this is now locked. I can continue to refine my calculations for schematic design. And if I go over, because we are capped here and here, we do let you know. So there is a $4,000 delta when this occurs, and we're essentially raising the red flag to the project manager to let them know that they need to reconcile that $4,000. So this is the future of project budgeting, and for each project, all those 4 tabs collapse right back into one. Next one up, here's the main event, reflecting on my past and part of the team's past is that the Monday morning meeting was and will always be a super important meeting to get the entire studio and entire project team together. A classic setting where the entire team sits around the table and addresses what projects are on fire, who is available, who isn't available. The problem here historically is the lack of visibility and adding team members ad hoc to a project without clear understanding of the implications for the project or the budget. MMD, short for Monday Morning Dashboard, our objective is to solve how we can do this for you with technology of scheduling and allocating time ad hoc. Let's go in and I'll present you some of the slides we're working on. As you can tell here, we'll immediately, when this is released, we will be replacing the schedule tab. On this view, you'll see the entire team for the week and see everyone's total hours allocations for the week. Ideally, everyone's close to 40. As we all know, the standard time might be everyone working 50 or 60 hours, but the goal really is to plan for 40 and stick to that. What's great is with these cards, you can see very clearly that Hansel has 3 different projects. He's assigned 4 hours currently to a project called Google London. And if you need to adjust that 4, you can either click here and adjust the 4 with your keyboard or numeric keypad, or use the plus and arrow signs to essentially change the value of time that you're allocating to Hansel. When you do this, everything else in the background, our technology is readjusting the project budget and projecting new forward trends and what Hansel's allocation will look like for the weeks ahead. To add a new project, as you can see here, adding new projects, we present it at the bottom of everyone's column. And from here, you'll be able to select the project you would like to add Hansel to if you need to add him ad hoc to a project. What we do need here is when you do that is we do need basic information. Since Hansel wasn't originally part of this project and you're adding him to this project, we're gonna need to know what phase, what role, the rate of that role, the total amount of time before we can complete the action of adding Hansel to the project. Once that's done, he's added to the project. You see here at 1315 West Foster for 6 hours. Because we added 6 hours to this project and we need Hansel on this project, we went over his total allocations for the week. He's now doing 42 hours. Let's readjust Google London down appropriately to get him right back to 40, that he only should be able to spend 4 hours on Google London. The next screen is really looking into Hansel's schedule at the weeks ahead. To plan weekly is great, but without visibility to zoom out, as we all know, context is super important. To be able to zoom in and then be able to zoom out quickly is how we be able to add visibility and transparency to each project. So this is what Hansel's schedule looks like in the weeks ahead. We've already added 1315 West Foster for him for this week, but as you can see here, it was an ad hoc move and he's not scheduled to work on this project for the following weeks. Lastly, we want to make sure that we're also designing views that will make information much more appropriate. So this is a condensed view where everyone is stacked right above. A proposal view is essentially staggering everyone. So it's very clear that all the blue here is one project, all the green here is 180 Natoma, and so on. What's super cool is if you do click on a project, we'll be able to essentially bring everyone to the fore, the entire team. Everyone here, if you clicked on 180 Natoma, will show up, the total allocations for the week for each individual, and then the total amount of time for the whole project. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit and really focus in on some of these cards designs. As you know, we are in DD phase, design development for 180 Natoma. And what's great is now you can also see the progress bar for each person, each member of the team, and how they're moving along the project. For example, Danielle here, a senior project designer, has already overspent her total allocation on this project, currently at 132 hours out of the 120. Let me zoom out a little bit. And we'll go back and we'll end and conclude on Monday morning dashboard. Next steps. Just clearly at the end of the day, I want to hear from you and we love your feedback. Regardless if you're a paying customer, we just want to make sure we're building the right tools and we're making the right decisions in our product development. And if you're not a paying customer or a customer on Monograph and you're interested, we'll love to hear from you and see if this is the right fit. That's it. Thank you again for your time. I'm gonna turn off my screen share so you can see my face, and then I'll address some of the questions that have been popping up in the chat.
Thanks, Robert. It went off without a hitch, so that's cool. We do have a couple of questions. Actually, two of these questions are about the same concept, which is basically timeline. So the question here is, can we give an estimated timeline for rollout of those three features that we just talked about?
So the two new features, one being the bottom of budgeting and project pause, we're really close. We're anywhere between 2 to 4 weeks out from finishing. The Monday morning dashboard, our goal was the quarterly release. So we're pushing for sometime in July.
Great. Is there, oh, okay, this might be helpful to talk about. Is there a time tracker to log actual hours? And this person might have just been a little bit late, but essentially there is a time tracker. We have two ways of tracking time right now. One is through a timesheet, and there's also a little button that we just went over, the timer, you can now track time on. So maybe quickly Robert can just show that.
I'll go right back to it. As you can see here, the timer is still going. We're moving pretty fast. That's 30 minutes that we've already tracked against 12 prompts means drive during design development phase and under the principal role. So that's the new way of tracking time. The old way will still always exist by clicking on timesheets and manually entering time for each project.
Right. Oh, we had some interesting questions also about the timer in relation to whether it can be moved, kind of like be detached. That's a very interesting idea. I think what I'll probably do for these type of questions that might arise is feel free to reach out to me at george@monograph.io for especially anything regarding what could be like feature improvements. And we can then talk more about the specificity of that use case and how you would like to use it. We're always interested in understanding the why, how these things could be helpful for you in order to design something that works with your use cases across, also all firms. Apparently a lot of people like the features. That's great. We have a question about, let's see. Oh, the recording itself. Yes, the recording will be made available. I will follow up with everyone that participated with an email that has the recording in it. We'll also have it hosted on our website as well for people to view after the fact. Let's see, can you move staff between jobs in the job schedule layout?
Yes.
This is with the Monday morning dashboard,
yes.
Right? So if you decide to put a different staff member on a job.
Absolutely. That's the main premise for working on Monday morning dashboard is really allowing you the agility to kind of move team members around as you need to, but at the same time not being irresponsible, but giving really informed decisions on what the implications has across the project. So you can move team members around, but we also want to tell you like you are adding more time and you are going to affect the budget. Make those decisions with the right information, but the goal of Monday morning dashboards allow you to do that.
Let's see. Thanks for that, Robert. Can you, so there's a lot of questions regarding the time tracking here. Can you track times on
I'll
other
share my screen again.
Yeah, because I think it might be helpful to have that in context since there's so many. Let's see here. Just make sure I can kind of summarize some of these. Okay, so in terms of time tracking, um, the two different features, right? The timesheets and the timer, the time tracker.
Yep.
Um, how do they work together? So it basically, like, is there any conflicts that could emerge from both of them working together?
There are not. So what we're doing is because we ask for quite a lot of information here, we do always have to cross-check. So if there's any discrepancy in this information here, what we do is we'll add a new entry, thus preventing any potential errors of like the overlap of like using the timer and then using the manual timesheets. So for example, I'll stop the time here. I'll keep everything the same. I'll click on edit, but I'll change one thing. I'll change it to a project manager. I'll create an entry and start tracking time. So essentially, I'm still tracking time, but I've just changed the role. Theoretically, then here in 12 Palm Springs, we should be able to then see a new entry. Oh, I think the timer was already started yesterday, so we added here to the next following day. I'll click stop, edit, change the criteria. Actually, what I'll do is I'll go back, I'll start the timer again. And let's say I'm adding time to the same project, 12 Palm Springs. I'll keep the same phase, design development, but I'll change the role. And I'll start tracking time, same project, but different role and different categorization for the activity. If I refresh the page, you can see here we automatically created a new entry for that new time being tracked.
Thanks for that. Related, can you track times on other tasks, things that are not project related specifically?
So currently, no. This has been highly requested. So we are going to be working on how you track time against overhead items. If that's the way I'm perceiving the question, we don't have a way right now. Our timer only tracks projects, but we are working on the second version of this timer where you'll be able to also track time against overhead. That is coming soon.
Great, thank you. Mm, we had a comment about the timer in, since small firms have multiple people working on multiple products concurrently and impromptu, multiple quote tear off times could be very useful, especially when clients walk in unexpectedly your call. That's interesting. For the person that submitted that one, it'd be great if you can reach out to me at George at Monograph. Would love to talk a little bit more about that specifically to understand that use case a bit better. Can you track time, Robert, on behalf of another person? Let's say if you're as an administrator and you want to track time for someone else.
Yeah, it's a really odd scenario to be tracking time for someone else. Fundamentally, the way Monograph is designed is everyone has their own account, every user, and every user should be responsible for tracking their own time. That said, an administrator, with given the right policy permissions, can go in and edit anyone's time. But I think we have to use the right vocabulary here. You can edit, you can essentially comment and approve and reflect and report on someone else's time. But I think tracking for someone's time, it's a bit odd, and they should be responsible for tracking their own time.
Yeah, I think for that specific question, it would be helpful to also dive a little bit deeper into the use case as to why you would want to do that. So,
Yeah.
feel free to reach out to me as well on that, and we can talk a little bit further. Because that could then impact how we build this out in the future as well.
Yep.
Okay, let's see here. There's some more. Okay, this was, I think, related more to, let me just make sure I'm kind of through with some of the. Okay, so I think we went through a lot of the the time tracking features. Um, let's see here. Okay, so I want to be able to see a project summary at completion so that I have a quick reference when I'm pricing a similar job. So this might be related more towards, and I think Matt, who answered who asked this question, feel free to expand on it a little bit further. But it seems that when a project has been completed, being able to understand, like I think this in this view here, what right. So for pricing for a similar job, this is actually really interesting. I might be able to answer some of this from a product perspective. One of the things that we're very interested in is, you know, as you build up information within Monograph and you input this data, over time, we think that we can provide you more relevant information as you're creating projects in order to help inform what those uh, you know, whether it's pricing for a similar job or give you some insights into how have you been historically performing, you know, at the very beginning of a project. The timeline for that is not necessarily in the near term. Right now, we're, as Robert sort of highlighted, um, oh, I think that's all right. I think Matt kind of answered in the chat, but so for the, yeah, and Matt's right on the chat about how we think about this almost as a database.
Yep.
But what the next level of a database looks like is that it provides insights and it provides a lot more thoughtful information that can help you plan more effectively. As Robert was mentioning, um, we we see, you know, we want to help you figure out how to make more revenue at the end of the day, and that means being much more uh, pointed about how information that you've currently stored is helping you, but also in how you track time and what you track time against. So one thing that we found when talking to several of the customers that we have is that things like additional services sometimes go by the wayside. Things like whether you're in scope or out of scope of a contract can go out of the wayside. And so I think all those, you know, as we build more features that help to surface that information for you, you'll have a better understanding of where you stand in real time, and can make better decisions based off of that. Sorry, that's one that I'm also personally passionate about, so I wanted to jump in on that one. We have this is a good one about policy, Robert. Will it be possible to only see hours on the Monday morning dashboard rather than hours and money? Not everybody in the company may be aware of the money values associated with their hours.
It's a really good question. And like part of this, the reason for hosting this webinar, particularly now, is we're finalizing designs for the Monday morning dashboard. And we want to hear more feedback on like what is important to the team, at what time for the team, and to what individuals at who are participating that makes up the team. So all that's a long-winded answer is that we don't have it all figured out yet in terms of how we design policies to who sees what. But ideally, with your comments and like send them to either me, myself, or George, we'll be able to make those decisions in how to format the policy permissions for Monday morning dashboard.
That's great, thank you. Let's see. Someone asked about scheduling information and whether it can be placed in a typical calendar view, so the month can be seen at a glance. That's interesting feedback. And I basically, it seems like for this specific page, can it be seen in a calendar view?
It has been asked for a few times. We have not started a design process and what that might look like, but we are taking into account that has been asked for a few times, and we don't yet have a way to address it yet, but we're going to keep working on it. Right now, we do have a weekly and monthly toggle up here in the upper right-hand corner, but it's not quite what you might consider as a traditional month, like a calendar view. The toggle between weekly and monthly here is really about showing the total hours between a week schedule and a monthly schedule. And you can see here the totals here readjust between the 40-hour week and then the 160-hour months.
We have a question on is there a way to schedule time for staff on a project that has exceeded the budget of the phase? So would like to have the ability to add more time to a project, even if it exceeds the scope, hours, or fee.
Yep. So going back into the project page, you can continue to add roles. And what will happen is when you do add a role in Money More dashboard, for example, here we added Hansel to 1315 Foster, is that we'll automatically add him to the project here with those specific allocations. So if you do need to, and you do need to add someone, and we all know that that does occur occasionally, that you just project needs to get finished and you're way over budget, you can do that here by adding team members to the project, even if it goes over. Keep in mind the objective is to avoid those type of situations. Knowing that it will occur, let's try our best and not go over budgets too often.
Yeah, so here's another one. I would really like to be able to plan out a project, be able to plan out a project in the proposal stage, and then convert it into a billable project when we win the project. The reason for this is that this is the time when we're going through the staff levels and assigning time for phases. I find it very tedious putting this time fee into the project after we start. We're essentially doing it twice now, once in a spreadsheet, then developing the proposal, and then transferring it from when we win a project. We'd really rather do it once in Monograph. And I think that's, sorry, go ahead.
What I realize is, and like I said, live demos are always a bit tricky. I did have this image prepared for essentially project statuses. I think I completely forgot to show the visual of what project status will look like and the 5 new statuses that we're going to be introducing. So as you can see here with the dash line, this will be a new representation of essentially a proposed project, which you use the exact same budgeting tool to plan for this project, 1680 Octavia Street. And then when it goes live, it will turn into a normalized color, giving a signal that this is now a live project. From here, we'll also be presenting you a new view in terms of what projects are on pause. So all the phases will be hatched, and what projects only have a phase as pause. So only one phase will be hatched. And then lastly, introducing a grayed out phase for projects that either are canceled or completed.
Hopefully that. Let's see. Right, I think I can take this question also. Any plans for a basic accounting of what clients pay and when, and to which phase? So basically being able to understand how this data rolls up to clients specifically.
Yep.
And how much we pay for consultants, engineering, et cetera.
Yep. So it's really important for us to address the role of consultants, and we'll be doing small features in the next couple months that addresses consultants. It's a big part in how architecture is designed and developed today, and we need really good transparency into like which consultants are on board, how much have they billed, how much have they rendered in terms of services, and how much is left. So absolutely, we're going to be working on that, and ideally within the next couple months. What was the other question, George?
We have a couple here. This one.
I think that was a 2-part question, wasn't it?
That one, sorry, I want to confirm. Oh yeah, and how do we pay for consultants, engineering, et cetera?
So in terms of billing, internally, we're also talking about project financials. So we're actively trying to figure out, well, what does those pages look like? And what are the informations that are essential for us to design for the architect to present project financials, which will then cover essentially what has been built, what hasn't been built, and what is left to be built. At the end of the day, I also want to be very clear, we are flirting with a fine line of being an accounting tool. And from my perspective, our goal is to not be an accounting tool. We want to be the best project management tool, and we go all the way up to the edges of what accounting might start to look like. And then clearly that's where QuickBooks or another great accounting software might come in and be your general ledger and essentially manage your transactions for the business.
Let's see here. This is an interesting one having to do with for any additions that happen outside of a locked budget for a project. Is there a way to indicate whether it's an override or a change order potentially, as opposed to creating new project phases to capture those hours?
So currently, right now, the ethos behind capturing things that are like oddities that come up, the appropriate use cases in Monograph is to create new phases to capture those appropriate changes. But we'll love to get a more deep dive into like your thoughts on how to better do that. And if there are better methods for us to essentially capture change orders or things that occur during a project or during a phase without introducing a brand new phase.
Let's see. Invoicing is another question here related to that. So any updates planned on the invoicing side? We like to use balance billing where we demonstrate to clients how much has been billed to date and the balance remaining for a particular phase. We're capturing all of this data, and how can we best display that on an invoice?
Yeah, so we do have invoicing now. It's also one part of Monograph that we have to continue to improve on. So there's still quite a lot of product development there in terms of how do we improve project invoicing. We do have a lot of data, which is great, which means by the time we start working on invoicing sometime later this year, we're going to be way better informed on how to build that feature out for you. What's unique about Monograph, which I'm particularly very proud of, is like having to do invoices before with the previous business. It's really difficult to go from tab to tab and have everything pull up just to figure out how much time has been worked, so I know how much to bill. The way Monograph does invoicing is a split screen view. So you always have a visibility into the hours worked for duration of time while you're completely editing a open format invoice on the other side of the screen.
Let's see. Yeah, there's another question here about profitability in relation to clients, being able to understand. Basically, like the idea here is let me see here. I just want to sort of synthesize this because it's right. Like understanding which clients are actually the most profitable, and this makes a lot of sense because it's related to the idea of I think about 60% of most firms make, every project is basically coming from a referral or from an existing client. So
Yep.
being able to understand which of these clients are your most, the best clients to work with is a kind of data point that people would like to understand.
Yep.
So how could, I think this is something that we have been talking a lot about internally. And I guess the trade-off, Robert, is where do we see it fitting into, that fine line between what an accounting software, the kind of information accounting software can provide for you versus what we provide.
Yeah. So like which projects are profitable purely on hours logged and hours billed and hours worked on is something that we will be able to surface. If you start to include the expenses that are associated with a project that are not project management specific, that might only get captured at the general ledger level, it will be hard for us to take that into account, right? And I think that's really where the fine line is. What I've recommended to a few of our customers is if you do have a lot of repeating clients, I think it's extraordinarily important to also set them up as categories. So you have a really clear way of filtering between clients that have a lot of repeat work. Categories here is designed to be super flexible. By default, we put in a bunch of architectural standard typologies of work, but we've seen wide use cases of using categories to capture repeating clients and using categories to capture essentially larger firms in their studios. From there and from this view, I think it's really clear to start getting, at least currently, how projects are performing to date and how off projects are in terms of the money gain relative to the performance of that phase. If you see too many red money gains, that means you went over allocations. And if you don't, and everyone's kind of right on today's mark, you're on track. So it's a great way to kind of get really high level information quickly by seeing a whole bunch of projects together on the project page.
Thank you. There is another question about, we have about 10 minutes left, so I think we'll be able to get through some of these. So is there a way to track tasks and have that data feed into timesheets and schedules? Basically creating a work plan for the team during the CD phase, who's tackling which drawing, etc. I think this is a really good point to talk about, you know, reinforcing this idea of like how we really want to make sure you can track time effectively, and how that time ties into the tasks that you do, the deliverables that you provide, the milestones that you provide, so that you have a really good sense of how long it might take for some of these deliverables to get produced. Robert, what are your thoughts on this part of like being able to track tasks and how will that tie to timesheets and schedules?
Yep, I've had a really unique perspective on tracking tasks against time. I think it's extraordinarily important, and it's going to be next up in terms of like the next big problem that we're going to start to dive into. So to whoever posed that question, we'll love for you to reach out and love to spend a little bit of time of one-on-one of really deep dive on how you track tasks to time and how you perceive how tasks relates to time. I can share publicly to everyone in terms of thematically how Monograph works. We do work in quarters. We start every quarter with a massive problem, and then we try to tackle that problem for the next 3 months. So the goal for this quarter was to essentially solve how do you allocate time ad hoc between team members on a weekly basis and really be a tool for your Monday morning meeting. That is the objective for this quarter. I think for the next quarter is really how does this information that we've just finished, the Monday morning dashboard, relate back to the task management system that we already have, and how do they talk to each other? This way we have a much better understanding of how that task and the time that it took to work on that task relates right back to the timesheet information you're logging for the project. So it's a really great question, and like that's probably our next big quarter project. We typically start off with asking a lot of questions. We write everything down. We talk to as many customers as possible. Then we go right into design, and then right after design, we go right into engineering software development.
Okay. Let's see here. Integrations. This is another great topic for us internally. Integrations with Xero, like improving the integrations we have with Xero. I think for integrations, there's a big piece, just so that, you know, in terms of our roadmap and things like that. We do believe it's important to integrate with various types of bookkeeping software out there. We have some improvements coming soon for QuickBooks, which is actually very exciting. And for Xero, I think for any of these other ones, we're kind of prioritizing them based on the number of people that request them as well. So please reach out to me at George at Monograph to talk a little bit more deeply about what that would look like for you. Let's see here. there's also, I think the last question here so far um, is, let's see, this is related back to clients and more so about just being able to host that information more specifically within Monograph so that people can pull as they're creating a project, pull from a list of clients and have that all be almost like a contact list separated from that from the rest of the features. And yeah, I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
I think it's going to be super important that we eventually solve it. George, you and I know that we've sat in like 4 different meetings in the last 2 weeks, and they've all mentioned like a way to manage contacts.
Yep.
So it's going to be a priority for Monograph. I don't have a clear visibility in when we're going to start solving for it, but we know that it's a big problem. What we want to do is go a little slow and be really smart about how we solve contacts. Contacts, as everyone knows, is a problem that has been around for us since the day business cards were invented. It's extraordinarily tedious and it's extraordinarily hard to maintain accuracy. I think that's really important. Like other than just managing contacts, we really need to think about how do we manage the accuracy of that contact. So what I'm saying is we want to work on it. I want to intentionally go slow so we do it right and make sure we're not just replicating a process that is essentially not very effective.
Yeah. Yeah, because for us to work on clients, it's another way of also focusing on just contacts in general. Like clients means contacts for us in some sense, and how do we make that information relevant to you in different ways is a big component to this.
Yep.
Um,
And we
but
can be really smart, right? Because we do have project information, and that could be one part of the app where we're essentially gathering accurate contact information. And we also bill, right? We have an invoicing feature. So what's interesting is to ensure that potentially the contact in both of those categories are either the same or they're cross-checking each other. I don't know yet. It is something that we're going to be working on. And we'll hopefully in the next couple of weeks, we'll have a little bit more clarity in what that looks like.
so I think we're at the end of the webinar. We have 3 minutes left. So I think unless there's any more questions, I'd just like to thank everybody for joining us today. We will be announcing another one of these product update webinars to happen in the next 2 months. So be on the lookout for that. And be on the lookout for also an email about the recording of this webinar so you can share with your team members. As always, we're here, we're available. Please reach out to us. Very excited to be working with all of you. And for anybody who's new, please feel free to reach out and sign up and try us out.
Thank you again, George, and thank you for everyone attending. Hopefully talk to you soon.
Cheers, everyone. Bye.
Bye.